In science, we really hold up beauty and elegance as the goal.
Monkeys couldn't sit down and write Shakespeare. Well, in fact, humans couldn't sit down and write Shakespeare.
Is truth important to me? It's still important to me, even though I know that I can't ever prove certain things.
Language itself is big chunks of metaphor that we're moving around.
What's so interesting to me is that in my personal life, or in my other life, or my life in relationship to art or novels, I have no problems admitting that truth is so elusive. So here was, you know, and I am pretty tough about my metaphors. I don't like using science as metaphor very much because I think it betrays a certain aspect of what's important to me. And so here I was at this rub of making truth metaphorical, making truth elusive, seeing how far does it really go. And even now, as I'm sitting here internally checking, well, is truth important to me? It's still important to me, even though I know that I can't ever prove certain things. Yeah. And I'll still side on a certain level, knowing that at the end of the day I can't prove those things, even though in my scientific research I need to be able to prove things. And I won't make any claim I can't actually prove.
Well, what's interesting to me about that is that you're so driven to pursue the kinds of truths that remind me of the kind that that the artist inherits automatically, which are the paradoxical truths, the ones that can only be surrounded, they can't be simply described. And you know, both of your books describe attempts to surround paradoxical truths with enough understanding or visualization or description that they can be apprehended because they can't be looked at directly. Right. In a way, that's my whole job. And so it isn't that I'm uninterested in truth, it's that I never think I'm going to get there by compiling other truths. I think I'm going to get there by compiling responses and paradoxes and evocations.
So you are getting to some level of truth.
Of course.
Even though you think it's, you wouldn't say truth is totally relative.
No, I'm not, I'm not, the relativism you describe of the scientists who couldn't, who decided that it really was possible that we were merely projections, are, my instinct is to say they've made the purest misunderstanding. For me, it's the muddy. The truth is always about this muddying of actuality and metaphor. That existence is a mingled. We live on a mingled plane.
Right.
Certainly, my characters dwell there, and I personally dwell there in a mingled realm. And so it's kind of the false obsession with purity is what I always think has to be chased away. Right. You know, people will fancy that, say, Raymond Carver, well, he was a pure realist. He didn't admit any, well, this is nonsense. The very tools he used were utterly choked, poisoned, overwhelmed, dripping, however you want to put it. They were laced like LSD with metaphor, because language itself is big chunks of metaphor that we're moving around and operating with. And it's this glorious impurity that I think always has to be reasserted.
You said a couple things that actually I think were very interesting. One is the idea that you could be so purely adhering to an attempt to get towards truth, or an attempt to adhere to logic, that you are totally lost. And that's a really interesting notion to me. I find that irony beautiful, that the people that I wrote about, that I was thinking about, that stuck the closest to logic, were the furthest afield. They were the most lost. They became utterly confused. They ended up drawing conclusions that even they knew were wrong. They knew they didn't believe. So the belief came first, and the logical argument came later, and the logical argument took them way away from what could possibly be true. So if I really believe that all I know is something that is scientifically verified, and what I realize is when I measure temperature, all I really see is mercury climbing. I don't really know that I'm seeing atoms with a certain kinetic energy, and then I have to come further and further to say, well, I don't really know this table's here. All I know is what I've learned to call pressure is what I'm experiencing against what I think are my fingers, and then you just get further and further away. And I think that irony is really beautiful, that you need the fuzziness of imperfect thinking. Yeah. But again, I think another thing that has parallel, we've talked a lot about the novel, but is the idea truth and awkwardness. You're talking about having something that's very discordant and intentionally discordant, juxtaposing maybe two genres or straddling them so much that you have another third thing emerging out of them. I think in science, the idea of beauty is it's the last realm in which people seriously, with a straight face, talk to each other about beauty. You know, visual artists would never be like, that's a beautiful piece of work anymore. I mean, you know, not in really contemporary.
It's true that that is a very difficult phrase. You know, after modernism, beauty is terrifically suspect.
Right, absolutely. And it's considered kind of provincial to aim for something beautiful. You know, we're not doing pretty pictures here, we're doing something. But in science, we really hold up beauty and elegance as the goal, because for reasons that I think nobody fully understands, it's a good criterion for distinguishing what's right from what's wrong. Right. And if something's beautiful and elegant, it probably is right. I mean, occasionally you'll see something that's so beautiful and so elegant and it's not right. It's just you can't believe it's not right, because that, for whatever reason, the universe does seem to hold it up as
leaning.
Yeah. And I don't understand that. I don't think anyone understands that. And then you can make arguments, well, maybe it's only human perception that we select from the vast sea of complicated things, a pattern that we can recognize, so we really impose patterns. And back to the idea of the atom moving around in the room, my mind doesn't follow every atom in the room, so I go for this averaged emergent quantity called temperature. And can
Beauty
I really
could
argue
be seen
that,
as a kind of temperature?
Right, exactly. It's only the emergent property that I'm able to perceive, and really underneath is a list. It's like a picture. Underneath is a list of digital codes, and I can't perceive.
Not so totally different from the insight. Whenever it was first attained, that one of the things people were selecting for without naming it when they thought a person was beautiful was symmetry.
Right.
And now we take that so for granted. It's such a commonplace. But in fact, this was not something anyone would have said, oh, I love looking at symmetrical people.
Right. Exactly.
They sought the name beauty to describe an evoked response.